sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. The dark tried to hide you and steal you away. Death tried to keep you inside of the grave. The enemy fought you, he tried but he lost. You cannot be stopped. When we cried for freedom, you tore down the walls. The weight of our burdens, you carry them all. Our fears and our failures hang dead on the cross. You cannot be stopped. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. We stand in your victory, we shout out your praise. Miracle maker, you're mighty to save. Awesome in power, relentless in love. You cannot be stopped. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Makes me whole. I love your presence. I love your presence. I love If you want it, come and get it, for crying out loud. This love that He has given you was never in doubt. Let go of your heart, let go of your head, and feel it now. Let go of your heart, let go of your head, and feel it now. If you want it, come and get it, for crying out loud. 'Cause this love that He has given you was never in doubt. Let go of your heart, let go of your head, and feel it now. Let go of your heart, let go of your head, and feel it now. I love your presence. I love your presence. I love you, Jesus. I love your presence. I love your presence. I love your presence. I love you, Jesus. I love your presence.
Amen. Come on.
Amen.
Come on, you can do better than that. Let's give God a hand clap of praise in this house. Jesus. Thank you, worship team. Everybody enjoy that worship team?
Yeah.
Come on. We've got a lot of our worship team traveling, so they're on vacation this week. So thank you all for doing what you're doing. And I'm loving Gina's voice. Amen.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Anna. You all are pulling double duty today. She's doing worship and running off with the kids. Hey, let's all just go in there. Amen. You got the that slide, that first slide I've got for you, Josh. But I don't know if you got that one. Anybody remember these kind of books?
Okay.
I know some of you probably remember them. I don't know. It might be before some of y'all's time. This is actually the author of some of these books. Used to write books of puzzles and games, and it was always that game. Did you ever used to play that game in the car? You were bored when you were a kid going down the road. I Spy with My Little Eye.
Yeah.
And the color of it is. That was tricky because you always had to have these ground rules. It has to either be in the car or can it be out of the car. But it's hard when it's out of the car because it's already gone by about 4 miles back. So we used to play that all the time amongst other games. And I know Amy talks all the time of her childhood growing up. You all had all kinds of games you all used to play in the car. There were 7 of them. They had to do something to keep busy. A person without a vision is a person without a future. A person without a future will always return to their past. A knife cuts because it has a narrow focus. When God predetermined our destiny, He factored in our stupidity and our stubbornness. Therefore, there's always enough time to finish.
Amen.
These are some famous quotes by some people, and I just thought that so fits, doesn't it? Thank God He did that.
Yes.
I mean, thank God because I sometimes wonder, what does He think when He's looking down at us? I'm like, I mean, some of the stuff we do is going in circles for years, and it's just like, don't worry, I've got this factored into His destiny. Her destiny it's all worked out. I got it worked out. The level of sacrifice that an environment requires will determine the size of people that will follow. I don't know if you can get that one or not. The level of sacrifice that an environment requires, or we can even say a vision requires, will determine the size of the people that will follow. That's a tough one.
Ooh.
That's probably the hardest one that I read this week, and it really hit me because the bigger the vision, the more the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Getting vision for that. Listen, vision has never been a problem for me. I've got vision coming out my eyeballs at times. But just because I'm a visionary doesn't make me very practical as far as applicating them or making them come to pass. Everybody has a different way and a different way of doing things. Some people are not called to be visionaries. Some people are called just to be I just need to see this part right here. Just this little part, and I can work on that. And sometimes being a visionary is very tough because your sight sometimes is so far out and you see things, it can be the most frustrating experience of your life. Because you've already gotten a glimpse of what God wants to happen, but you're stuck with looking at what is happening. That is the hardest thing to walk through in your life. Because 99% of the time, it will be the opposite of what God is about to do. Now, this equates not to just church vision, to personal vision, this equates to children or to anything. Listen, we all laid around when we were young and we envisioned and planned and dreamed about what our life would be. Mm-hmm. Did it ever happen? Anybody ever figure that one out? Did it happen the way you thought?
No.
No, that was a strong no. And it's amazing today, this week, and I want to thank Leo. I'm going to lift her up a little bit. I want to thank her for being just an encourager. She just getting through burying her father, but yet I watched her and her family just jump back. Her and David just like, we got a vision. We got to do stuff. And she had sent a message to us this week. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm just going to say it. And I'm not going to go in detail about the whole message, but it was so amazing to me that God wanted to speak to Amy and I in a way that took me all the way back to when I was a kid. And she began to describe things that she didn't know anything about. She began to describe seeing me walking around a field putting weeds in my mouth. Not weed. You just get that clear. Weeds. I grew up on a farm. Used to do that, anything, honeysuckle, anything I could find. And I would spend a lot of my time sitting in a tree and laying in a tree by a lake that we lived on. And I call it a lake. It's a very, very small lake. But it's spring-fed, therefore it's alive, therefore it's a lake. If you didn't know the difference between a pond and a lake, that's the difference. And as I was sitting there, I would lay there and I would just envision my life and I would think about my life and I would pray. I would pray to God to whom I understood Him to be at the time. Now, I was raised in a certain denomination that I was raised that you talk to God, but God doesn't talk back to you too much. And if He does, then you're quite strange. And they generally didn't like that. But I found out throughout life, God does talk to us. And He likes to talk to us very clearly. But I remember laying there, and even some of the things that she had described in this message about my feet dangling and looking down on the world. I spent a lot of time in trees. And I would actually had a branch that I would lay in. I could go to sleep in it. If I couldn't be found, generally they'd find me in a tree somewhere, because that's usually where I spent my time. But it's amazing how God can take everything that you're going through, everything you've been through your whole life, and all the workings and all the plans that you try to figure out. And we do that. We just talked about that last week, all the thoughts. 55 a minute. Most negative. Trying to work out what God is going to do and how we're going to make it happen. But that's a big trap to get into, because if you think that God needs you to make it happen, He can do it without you. Matter of fact, He can do it better without us at times. I'll admit it, He can do it way better without me.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how God could bring all that back to this simple point of, remember when you just used to hang out with me in the tree? It was just that simple. Do you know I don't require any more of you than that? Just to love me. That's it. And I just want to love you. When you draw it back to that simplest place, because my love for God, I had to define based on what I was doing. Because I'm a doer. I grew up in a house full of doers. Grew up in a farm. Something always had to be done. They showed love through doing. They showed love through action more so than hugging and just hanging out and enjoying each other's time. It was always a regiment. Always something had to be done. Always hogs to be slopped. Always cows to be run. Always something. And so that raised in me an identity that I could only please my God by doing. And that I could actually had to get to a realization and a revelation that God just wants to love me for who I am, because He created me that way. And it's not based on what I'm doing. Now, doing, it says that will come because of our faith, because we walk out our faith and we want to do things for God as He leads us. But that shouldn't be our focus, is doing. And sometimes we can get there. Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained, but happy are they who keeps the law. Now, we know that there's a difference between vision and the law. The law was there, and Moses got the law because he had to put some boundaries up, because if there was no vision and no singularity or focus, you're all over the place. Anybody experience that in your own life? You get to a place where the vision gets clouded. You get to a place where you just don't understand the future. It doesn't make sense to you anymore. And what do? We start doing this. We start doing the whole back and forth across the road like a rabbit. You ever seen a rabbit go down the road and it just runs back and forth? If a rabbit just stood still, he'd been fine. But no, it's shoot, 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 funk.
Yeah.
That's usually it.
Yep.
And I've had to learn that in my own life, that understanding the vision is a bridge between the present and the future. Without it, we perish and go unrestrained. We go hog wild. We go out getting into stuff we had no business getting into. Starting things we had no business starting. Getting involved in stuff we had no business getting involved in. Because we don't have a focus and understanding of what God has created us to be. And we're trying to find it by this. Feeling our way through the dark. And listen, I don't care who you are, you're going to go through seasons where you just don't see well. Amy and I are in a season right now, we don't see very well. We're in the store, we don't both have our glasses, we're passing them back and forth. What does that label say? I don't know, use my glasses. And she's sitting there, okay, yeah. I mean, we look crazy sitting there looking at these products and trying to read the back labels. We can't read them. I can't even make a pizza at the house without having my daughter, hey, Aaron, what's it say? How long? How hot? How long? I can't even see it. Because the older you get, sometimes it's harder to see, isn't it? I liken it to this, and I love this statement. Vision gives pain a purpose. If you can get anything from today, take that. Vision gives pain purpose. I liken this to, I had a goal when I joined the military. I don't know if it was necessarily the right goal, but it was, I joined for a lot of different reasons, mainly because I just wanted to get out of town. I grew up on the farm, and I swore I was never going to do the farm life. And I saw the military as a ticket to get me out of there. But I also saw it as a ticket because I fell in love with this awesome woman. 30 years ago, we married. And I knew that was my ticket to get some freedom to where we could live together and we could start a new life. But all through boot camp was a lot of pain. I mean, for one moment you're in high school and you're just kind of shooting spitballs and and not taking anything serious. Like I said, I graduated with a 1.97 grade point average. I was not taking much serious. Woo! Some high things in my life. But I'd be graduated. But when I rolled off that bus at boot camp, my life changed dramatically and pain entered my life. It was one of the hardest things I ever did because you ain't in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. I'll never forget, I call the first week the Smurfs. They put us in these blue dungarees and we didn't even get to wash them. They were brand new clothes. You ever put brand new stiff clothes on? So you knew you were noobs because you're walking around with these things. But when everybody took their clothes off, take a shower, we were blue head to toe. The dye on the material after sweating on them turned you blue. Couldn't get it washed off for a week. So you knew you were a new guy because you were blue. So we call them the Smurfs. That's how it all started. But through the process of that, the only thing that kept me going through the pain was I had a vision for what was going to happen after. It is the same way with church life, with your personal life, with anything. There is pain that will come into your life, and many times we try our best to avoid it. And matter of fact, we oftentimes see pain as something to be avoided. But when God is having you head straight on into it because He wants you to experience the pain because it's going to actually cause you to take you to a place of greatness. But we are a people of paths of least resistance, aren't we? Mm-hmm. We constantly are looking at the crooked road ahead and the problems. We're thinking, okay, I got to find me another road because that is not where I'm going. And we try to avoid it. I spent many times jumping from church to church to church trying to avoid the pain of what God was trying to take me through. All in while, He's just waiting for me to stand still to go through it. Because I see people come and go in churches all the time. And I know God's about to bring them to something. And right when they get to the moment where it's going to get painful, punch out. They go find another church. I promise you within 6 months it starts over. Because God is not a God that He changes what He's called you to. Your reaction doesn't have any effect on God. Because He's already mapped out your life. He knows the times you're going to say no. He knows the times you're going to give up. And He's already got a plan for you. I thank God for that. I thank God for that. The only thing that stops you from growing is no. I won't do it anymore. All He's waiting for is a yes. So we have to see that going through boot camp of sorts and going through pain is much like picking up the cross daily, isn't it? If you're facing something in your life and you have a concreted vision in you that you know there's something on the other side of that, you will stay put through that pain. But pain is a hard thing to see as temporary, isn't it? We have made decisions in our life, and if anything you'll get from us, you'll get very transparent. We have made decisions financially in our life that are based upon a momentary part of pain that affects you for the next 10 years. Where if you would have just stayed put and walked through it, you'd have been out in 6 months. Or maybe a year. Anybody feel the pain of that? Okay. We're not the only ones. So let's look at what vision is. Paul prayed that the eyes of our heart would be enlightened. In other words, we perceive with our eyes, but we see with our hearts. Our minds receive images from our eyes, but our heart interprets these images. I'll put it this way. The word says in John 8:32 that you will know the truth and the truth will make you free. You realize that word truth there is not referring to biblical truth itself, even though it does include that. But it actually, that word means reality. You go to a movie, and I love going to movies. Anybody like going to the movies? And the last movie I went to was with Larry, and I promise that was my allergies acting up. I did not cry in that movie. Actually, Amy knows better than that. I cry all the time. She has plenty of tissues because I'm just a big crybaby. But, you go to a movie for 2 or 3 hours, you are in that reality. And when you're emotionally affected, you're just like, you come out of that movie, your reality is affected, everything you see that day. But we sometimes forget that that's a movie. It's not reality. But that not reality changes our reality. It is no different than how we operate. Truth is not always truth to us. It's what we perceive truth to be. That's the hardest. Because you can have two people standing side by side and encounter a person or a circumstance, and both of them could totally interpret reality differently. Anybody ever heard someone say something, and you heard someone say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that," and you're thinking, "Well, I heard them say it. I didn't think anything about it." Mm-hmm. "Oh, no, I heard it. Their eyes were rolling." I mean, we all can perceive things the wrong way, and our perception affects the context in which we receive things. That is the hardest thing to filter out is, God, I need your truth. Absent of my reality, absent of what I think truth is, I need you to show me truth. I have seen, and Amy and I have seen countless people come to the altar, come to ministry, come to whatever, and the moment the Holy Spirit begins to reveal and get under the hood and start poking around, I can just see it, and you won't see them again. This church is a very hard church because that happens a lot. It does. We can grow in numbers real easy. We can adapt, we can change, we can do the programs, we can do all that. But we have to be what God has called us to be. Nothing more, nothing less. And God has called us to be a prophetic speaking church. That's just the way we are. So what does that mean for us? You just keep doing. You keep pushing forward. You keep doing what you're called to do, and eventually things will just work. But it won't always look that way, will it? Truth. There's three different kinds of people, I feel like, that have giftings in the area of sight and vision. I call it foresight, insight, and oversight. True godly vision consists of all three. Foresight is like looking through life with a telescope. This outlook allows us to know what is ahead, and it connects us to our future. Foresight is the element of vision that helps life make sense and give us motivation that we described earlier. Now, insight is like looking and viewing life through a microscope. And this is a hard one. Perception gives us an understanding of why things happen in our life. It also helps determine the underlying motivations of the heart. But sometimes insight, you're so focused on the little that you miss the big. Foresight, you're so visionary and focused on the end, it's hard to focus on the little. And that is so difficult at times to do because I'm a visionary. But what God will do is bring people around your lives that are what are called administrators. You know what admin means? To add to the mission. That's why you have to have people to fill in the blank. Oversight puts life into context. It's like flying over your house in a helicopter. There is perspective that we can only receive from a place on high. Why did Moses go up on the mountaintop a lot? Because he needed to see. He needed some oversight from God. Now, what we have done here in this church is try to establish a leadership structure that encompasses all three. Because where I will be short-sighted, but I can see far, we have other leaders that can see the detail. It's kind of like bricklayers. There was a story of 3 bricklayers. And a man walked up to the 3 bricklayers, and the first one, he says, "What are you doing?" "What's it look like I'm doing?" "I'm laying bricks." He asked the second man, "Hey man, what are you doing?" "What's it look like I'm doing?" "I'm building a wall." He asked the third one, "What's it look like I'm doing?" "What are you doing?" "What's it look like I'm doing?" "I'm building a palace." The 3 bricklayers were doing the same thing, but each one possessed a different way of seeing it. Now, it's really hard for those that are focused on the microscope to stay excited because you get caught in the mundane bricks. Another brick. Just another brick in the wall. I know some of the songs are running through your head right now. Gotcha. Michelle Becker popped up. That's so tough because you do get caught up into the mundane of doing. And there's nothing more discouraging than month after month, year after year, plugging along. I've talked to more pastors that are on the verge of quitting because they just can't do it anymore. And I say, "Well, what's going on with you?" And they'll say the same thing. I just feel like we're going through the motions. We're doing the same thing week after week, week after week, week after week. Nothing's changing. Nothing's happening. Trust me, we went through years of that. And we're just now starting to see fruit after years of plowing. Sometimes I say through years of fumbling through the dark. Sometimes it feels like that too. But it's hard to admit that you don't encompass all three visions. Very few people encompass all three. As a matter of fact, the Word says it will only come through counsel. In Chronicles, it talks about these were people who actually came together and they got the wisdom of God, understanding and knowledge of God because they had counsel of many. Now, the problem that happens and why a lot of churches divide is because lack of understanding of the vision. Administrators, you can only have one vision. God's not okay, this church has got 5 visions. There is one main vision. And what happens is people come along because they have a gift and maybe they had a vision for something that they didn't accomplish and they try to infuse that vision into what's already there, and eventually they cause a split. Anybody experience that? And what happens is administrators forget sometimes that they're not there to create vision, they're there to facilitate vision, to admin and to help. And that's what the difference is. Anybody follow me?
Yes.
Vision from the Lord creates a mission from heaven. Now we have to understand and capture this, and I take it back to the most simplistic form is Habakkuk 2, verse 2 through 3. If you are in a place where you know that God has given you dreams, He's given you vision for something in your life, the first step is just to write it down. Write it down. Start there. Because the Word goes on to say, and I love this, and I'll read the whole thing. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that and for some versions say that when a herald runs with it, a herald is a proclaimer or a preacher, so that they may run with it who reads it. For still the vision awaits for it its appointed time. It hastens to the end, but it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. I think this is probably the first scripture I ever wrote into a stack of notebooks that we have at home. And we started there. Now, it's not easy because there are some that will tarry for decades and decades and decades. Those are the hardest because visionaries, we want things to happen now. Oh, I had a dream last night. God showed me this is going to happen. Boom. Larry, you just had one last night. The hardest part between that vision and the wait, it's the wait. It's all in the wait. Especially when you see the opposite of what God is showing you. The reason why God is showing you is because you're in the season of opposite. That's why God shows you these things. There are mile markers to keep you moving down the road. Because you don't need a lot of reminder when things are great. You need a reminder when you're at a point where you feel like you're losing your vision and you're just like, okay, God, I don't see it anymore. Anybody here ever lost vision? I don't know of a person that hasn't. I don't know of a time that I haven't been in a season of my life where I'm like, God, I just don't see it anymore. I need help. Help show me something. Give me something, and then a mile marker will appear. It's like driving down a road in the middle of a desert. You just don't even know if you're going to make it to the gas station, then you see a sign. Okay, I'm heading in the right direction. Those are the hardest things to do. Another thing you need to be focused on is you can't do it alone. I don't care how big and grand your vision is or how small and insignificant you think it is. God did not create you to do it alone. Period. He didn't create us to be alone in the first place. So what makes us think that we could carry it out alone? Early in ministry, used to think that. Early in ministry, I thought, oh, how great I art. Ooh. God, you sent me to this world to change some things. I'll never forget when we first just got enough religion in us and enough spirit to be dangerous. And I thought it was my life's mission to start going to, because I was raised Baptist, I thought it was my life's mission to start going back to Baptist churches and show them the error of their ways. Yeah, how'd that work for you? You see, I'm not in one right now, right? It's funny because I had this arrogance about me that I thought that, oh, God's giving me this revelation of what my life is going to be. Therefore, I'm just going to go out and make it happen right now. That is the biggest lie from the enemy you could ever do, and don't even step out and try. I've learned God can do more with me standing still than me trying to make it happen. Matter of fact, it just slows it down greatly. I remember going and thinking that, oh wow, this is what God's called me to. I remember trying to push vision on people around me and deciding for them what their vision was going to be, because this is my vision. I'll never forget, I was so convinced. Remember that time I was so convinced that we were going into ministry with Kevin and that group, and I was so convinced that that was going to happen because I was so excited about doing something for God. I was going out because he played musical instruments. I was going out and buying speakers. I was buying equipment. I was just so far ahead of God, it wasn't funny. And the whole time, this man named Kevin is shaking his head because he's like, I ain't seeing none of this. Finally, I had to have somebody come and calm me down and say, brother, let's talk. Thank God they did. Because I was literally causing confusion because I was out of time. I was trying to push a vision on a people that it wasn't for that people. There are many times where I see churches change ministers, and a minister will come in and completely change the vision of the church. Sometimes it's meant to be, sometimes it's not. I've seen people gathered to churches just because of personality. And I hear people say this all the time. I'm only here at Overflow just because of Buddy and Amy. That is the worst thing you could ever say. Please don't be here for me. And don't be here for Amy. Now be here for us. You know what I mean? Support us. But if God has not called you here because you haven't caught the vision of what He's about to do, you just being here for us is not going to accomplish what you're called to do. Does this make sense? Churches that are built on personalities will soon fall. Because there is a season for everything. I've seen countless churches that grow to be 300-400 people, and the pastor and his wife, God moves them on somewhere else, and I watch it just plummet. Because their goal and their focus and their vision was so tied into that couple that they couldn't handle it without them. Does this make sense? I'm going to take you to a scripture real quick, and I'm going to tie it up. In 1 Corinthians 3, verse 6 through 11. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives growth. He who plants and he who waters are one. Each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. We are God's field, God's building. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I lay a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. This is the confusing part about vision, and I'm going to clue you in on this. Just because God gave you a vision and you can see it in the end result doesn't mean God's going to have you take it to the end result. That is a hard thing to swallow. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And it is a confusing thing. Take prophets in the Bible. Many times God would give them the complete vision of what was going to take place, but they were just there to speak it and walk off. Would you agree with that? Sometimes we can get so confused to think that a ministry that God has put before you can't survive without you, that you are setting yourself up for a huge fall. It wasn't until Amy and I were in a place where we knew we couldn't do it that God started blessing it. God does some very peculiar things, and He will call some peculiar people to do what He's called them to do. Opposite, those people will be the opposite of what you think in the natural is needed to get the job done. That's another one you got to worry about. David was not someone that they thought to be a giant killer. Moses, I'm a man of unlearned speech, I stutter. Everyone that God ever used, Gideon, all the way down the line, had come to a place where they acknowledged that they couldn't do it, but God could. It is those moments when I was young in ministry that I said, oh, I can do this. I want this. And you know what I wanted more than anything? I wanted the accolades. I wanted the position. I wanted the title. I wanted the many medals. They call those in the Bible mule trappings, metals. I got a bunch of them in my office. That and $1, I can get a Coke. Those are awesome and great, but those are the accolades of man. Those are not what I want. I want to know that when I go and enter the gates of heaven, that I just hear, well done, faithful servant. That's it. That is it. It's not that someone left a building in our name, not that someone left a monument to our name. It's that someone recognized the name. That is it. And I know our transition from that in the early parts of ministry, it was, oh, I can, I will. Sounds like the enemy, doesn't it? I shall ascend. I will. But God had to bring that to an end and let it come crumbling down around me to realize that it ain't about me. But on the flip side of that, the enemy will try to tell you that you are not worthy to carry out the vision that God has put before you. And that's a lie too. It's not about being worthy, it's about being willing. Because God says, I chose you, I created you. Flaws and all. Then you get a revelation one day that you realize that your flaws aren't a weakness. That they're actually setting God up to get the glory beyond measure. Because if someone could look at you with your many flaws and see you carry out something great for God, they no longer see you, they begin to see Him. This is what it's about. And sometimes what we do, we hide our flaws. We're good at hiding stuff. Anybody got their hiding places? Amy got hiding places for chocolate. I find it every time. Billy Joe, I know all the snacks you keep funneling through the underground connection. I find them. Listen, God's good at finding our hiding places. Everybody stand to your feet. Listen, I thank God that God's put us in a place where we're surrounded by people like you that have many different levels of vision, different types, from the insight to oversight to, there's many different sights. But I thank God that He has surrounded us with a group of people that I know that He's about to do something wonderful through. And I'm excited about that because you're part of that. But it's not easy because the pain it takes to get to where we're going isn't popular. And it hasn't been. Anybody who's been here in the last 5 years, you're going to know, you know what I'm talking about. It is not easy, it's not popular, and it's hard to look at things through your natural eyes. But one thing I do know, God is faithful. One thing I do know is He's not a liar. One thing I do know that He is for us and not against us. One thing I do know is that He can take a broken, messed up bunch of crackpots like us and do something great in this community. But at the end of it all, He's in charge of it all, and He owns it all. And if God showed up and told Amy and I, this person or this couple is the next to take it to the next level, we will gladly step away. I'm not saying that's happening now. Don't take that and read into it anything. I'm just saying that's our heart attitude. No matter what you put your hand to, know that you're very replaceable and that you may only be there to lay a foundation where someone else is called to build. Either way, you both get the same dues. And I love that about God. Can you got that other picture put up there? I love this, and this popped up to me, and as I was pondering this morning, and I was like, God, just bring me confirmation of what it is you're doing. Anybody know what this is? It's a castle. Yeah, there we got that. This is called Leeds Castle. It's in England. This castle was actually built by an Anglo-Saxon chief named Lead. You wouldn't have guessed that, huh? In 857, this little island was nothing more than, it was a vision to be a castle. But the main person who built it, named Leeds, it turned out to be just a wooden fort. That's where it started. Just a wooden fort, just a structure, just a skeleton. And it's amazing to me throughout the years because then along came some other people who took ownership of it, and in 1119 it became more of stone. But then even throughout the generations to generations, years and years, they kept building and transitioning it to where you see a full-blown castle now. But somewhere, someplace, there was a vision for that, hundreds of years in the making, and someone probably even looked at that vision as a pipe dream, because how in the world in those times, in those years, could you build something on a little island, separated from the land? I put that up there just to say that your vision has to start somewhere. It may be just a mud hut on an island, but one day God will see it to fruition to be the fortress He created it to be. Anybody in here, you feel like you just had some visions go dead in your life? I can tell you there's some times, though, that you have to understand that God will shift your vision depending on where you're stationed. In the military, we traveled around every 3 years to a different duty station. My vision changed. I didn't quite understand it. One season, Amy and I found ourselves in a church. We became youth pastors. If you approached me with a youth pastor position now, we would run out the back door. And we were very successful at it because there was a season and a time and a place for that vision on our lives. But eventually somebody else took that and we had to move on. You see what I'm getting at? You just got to make sure you're in the right place at the right time and the right vision. And God will do wonderful things. And I promise you one thing, after every battle we have fought to get here, I know it's the right place, I know it's the right people, I know it's the right vision. Because we're starting to see fruit of it. We're seeing fruit of it. Now what you also have to understand is your end result vision may change slightly when you get the reality of it, because your perspective had to shift to what you originally thought that vision was. You catch that? God had given us dream after dream after dream of a group of people coming into this church from the front and rear doors. They were piling in here. There was lots of fruit, and there was a buffet style feeding them out there. We didn't understand that this was Recovery Church. And when the first Recovery Church came on the scene, we still didn't even get it. And this is why afterwards we're going to sit and talk about it a little bit. Because oftentimes when the reality of what God's truth is finally manifest before you, you have to realize that sometimes your perspectives needed to be shifted. And that's where we're at right now.